Welcome back to Spring One 2020. We're in the second half of the first day. Next up is Leading Engineers to Water, the art, science, and culture of technical coaching. Presentation today is by Michael Maglacio. See you on the other side.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Michael Maglacio. I go by Migs, and I work for Target. I'm here today to talk to you a little bit about leading engineers to water. So the art and science of developer coaching. Now, we'll get into exactly what that means here shortly. But before we get into that, let's do a couple of quick housekeeping things. So Target, most of you are probably familiar, but here's a few interesting facts and figures. So we have over 360,000 team members, a whole lot of stores, lots of distribution centers, 6 headquarters locations, 5% of our profits goes to community, and we've been in service for about 57 years now. We also have a robust online presence, and we're moving more in that direction. So who am I? My name is, again, Michael Maglacio. I go by Migs. At Target, I serve as a RISE software engineering coach. Now, what that means is that I like to say that my job as a coach is making tech less scary for product teams. But really what that means is introducing technology and acting as a change agent to empower teams to deliver at their best for both themselves and for Target. I'm based out of Minneapolis, Minnesota. Okay. Before we get into the content of the presentation, I just want to go through one more quick thing. So this is a Japanese proverb. Ii no naka no kawazu taikai o shirazu. I've studied Japanese for a lot of years, so I tend to open up my presentations with a Japanese proverb. The definition of that is a frog, or translation of that is a frog in a well knows nothing of the great ocean. In terms of the English meaning, that can have a lot of different connotations, both positive and negative, but I interpret it like this. Not thinking outside the box isn't a good thing. It's a bad thing. Even though the frog in the well is happy, he understands the boundaries, he knows his world, he's missing out on a whole lot. So my thought on this is look beyond your preconceptions and be open to learning new things today. I think what you find might surprise you. Let's talk a little bit about the engineering mindset. So normally at this point in the presentation, I would ask how many, for a show of hands, how many engineers do we have in here versus managers versus like product managers and people on the business side. I assure you this is a safe space for all 3 groups where I hope to provide benefit to people in all 3 groups. Usually I get about half engineers and half manager, product manager types. So because of that, I want to dive in a little bit further into the engineering mindset itself. So a few things about engineers. They want to do their best work, but their best work consists of solving problems on a daily basis that are extremely complicated. Engineering is hard to do, but it's even harder to do well. When you combine solving those technical problems with requirements to work with and integrate with many different people and many different development teams, you have a recipe for a lot of different things that can happen there, and a lot of different stressors and a lot of different places where engineers can run into trouble. DevOps, for example, even though a lot of it is built into pipelines and built around automated systems, it fuses engineering, testing, and operations acumen. And just because you have everything built out doesn't mean that everybody on each development team might understand what their roles and responsibilities are in regards to DevOps and how to handle it when something goes wrong. So needless to say, there's a lot of things here, and none of them are easy. There's some examples of some of these challenges in more detail. Some things like arbitrarily chosen deadlines without business context. So when I'm coaching teams, I like to refer to this as the fake deadline. And I always get a lot of smiles and nods when I bring this concept up, because basically what I'm talking about here is either a business leader or even a technical leader, somebody outside of the team that's building the product, turning around and saying, okay, we want feature X in production by 2 weeks from Tuesday. And 2 weeks from Tuesday is just pulled out of nowhere. And there's no concept in terms of that leader or in terms of the team, like what that actually means. So people will run into death marches straight to meet this arbitrary deadline given to them by some type of leader that doesn't necessarily make sense in the grander scheme of things. And I see this a lot with organizations who might be agile in name but not in practice. These are the same folks who do a lot of drive-by requirements and keep deadlines the same, things like that. You also have, for engineers, top-down technology introduction. So again, word soup, but what I'm referring to here is, for example, a technical lead goes off to a conference, gets very infatuated with a particular technology or a particular pattern or a particular methodology, and brings that back to the team and basically says, I don't care if you've been coding in basic Spring Boot for the last 5 years, we're switching to Ratpack now, and everything has to be in Ratpack. And by the way, the deadline's not changing. We also have scope creep. So the business always likes shiny things. That's just a fact of life. It's nature. You have conflict within teams. You have lack of psychological safety. This can manifest in a lot of ways, but I've seen it a lot, especially in code reviews, where people who are different levels of skill among the team or from different backgrounds might operate in different ways regarding code reviews. And people can have different feelings about them where it's not about the code, it's about the person. That's a common theme that we'll get to throughout the presentation today, is that a lot of technical problems aren't necessarily technical in nature. A lot of them are people problems hiding under the surface. We'll talk to that shortly. Another problem that engineers refer to sometimes is imposter syndrome. You've heard of this before probably, and the Dunning-Kruger effect. So for those who haven't heard of that before, that it generally is the more knowledge that you possess about a topic, the less that you realize you actually know. So when you have just surface level view of something, it looks really simple until you zoom in and realize just how complicated everything looks. So the more you know, the more you realize you have left to learn. That happens a lot in engineering. And I tell my teams constantly that, don't feel like you have to know it all, because nobody does. Tech is a huge field. There's a lot of specializations. There's a lot of things. You just have to learn what you need to do. You have to learn what you need for the particular product or the particular team that you're looking to support. You also have the technical arguments with strong opinions focus more around tech and less around the business need. The stereotypical example of this is tabs versus spaces. Your product manager is not going to care whether there's tabs or spaces in the code. They just want to make sure that the product gets delivered on time to the stakeholders of the quality and of the functionality that they wish for. But a lot of arguments go deep into the weeds in places where they don't need to go. So a few words about RISE. So RISE is Target's interactive learning team for all things technology and agile. We used to be known as the Target Dojo, for those who are familiar with that. As a dedicated coaching team, though, and as the pioneers of immersive learning at Target for product, agile, and DevOps practices, our purpose has evolved over time. And so is the breadth and depth of the services we offer, especially in this kind of new remote environment that we're living in now. When I applied for this talk, I expected to be giving it in Seattle in front of a group of people. And instead, I'm sitting here in my home office talking through things. So, our even the way that we deliver coaching and the way that we deliver mentoring is now in this new remote world that we're in. So the breadth and depth of our services has increased. We exist to unite product teams, cultivate collaborations, and elevate skills across Target. So we decided, rather than focusing just on an agile product dojo, that we were going to elevate teams, and it was time to properly reflect that in our branding. We have two types of coaches: agile process coach and software engineering coach, split between 3 different campuses of Target. We are at the tip of the spear of workplace agility, adapting to the new format that we're in quickly and effectively. And software coaches are relatively new to this space, but only in the sense that we've been kind of getting out there and showing our message to the world a little bit more now in the last couple of years than in the past. So let's talk about coaching. What is a coach? A coach is many things. A coach can be an advocate for recommended technologies and patterns across an enterprise. So making sure teams are up to date and choose the most viable solution for their particular problem. They can be a leadership whisperer. When I say this, I'm not saying that the coach will run off to leadership to report on how the team's progress is going or how individual teams are performing or individual people are performing. I mean, in exactly the opposite. They serve as a conduit for communication between the team and leadership to help them understand each other, as well as a team confidant. So if there are intra-team conflicts, the coach can definitely serve as kind of a mediator or a neutral party that can help resolve some of those personal issues that I was talking about before, as well as a stakeholder. So even though the coach might not necessarily report to the same management structure or be responsible for the delivery of the product, they're invested in the success of the teams. We coach a lot of teams, but we're invested in the success of everybody that walks through our doors. But most importantly, a coach is a change agent. I've heard a few people on this track actually mention those words today, and that's a very important thing to keep in mind. Change is what spurs progress. But unfortunately, there's a few things about change that make that really difficult. First, it's not rational, it's emotional. Second, it's scary. Inertia, keeping things the way they are, is a warm, safe, comfortable, familiar blanket. It's preferable to diving headfirst into the unknown way more often than not. And the only time people generally dive into the unknown is when the fear of change is actually less than the fear of remaining the same, meaning that they're in a world of hurt already and being forced into change rather than nudged towards change or drastic change rather than healthy incremental change. Change is cross-cultural. I've seen it in a lot of teams across the world, having to implement change in different ways. I do want to emphasize that it is the job of the coach to instigate and demystify the act of change. Attitude trumps aptitude 100% of the time. Attitude is by far the most important thing in regards to development teams. Often the biggest challenges we see are not technology related, they're not competence related, they're people conflict related. So being able to identify those and resolve them is a huge part of what we do as software coaches. What sparks change organically? That's a really difficult question because no one wants to take this first step. There's a million reasons not to. I mentioned before, inertia is comfortable. There's a million excuses. It's not me, it's not our team that needs to change. It's leadership. It's the team that we're interacting with. It's the product manager that's being unreasonable. It's the technology that we're forced to use that's out of date and ridiculous and error prone and all of those problems. There's a million reasons not to change. Coaches have to change how they interact with teams to promote that change organically. And the easiest way to promote change organically is through empathy and compassion. Let's talk about sparking change. So another term that I'm going to keep coming back to today is empathy, which is a little bit of a misunderstood concept. So empathy is not discomfort or distress in response to someone else's misfortunes. It's not pity. It's not sympathy in the sense of it's not a wish to see someone's problems resolved. Instead, it's feeling what your team feels. It's stepping into the shoes of someone and being with them on the front lines. Whatever battle they're fighting, you're fighting with them. And you have to get there in order to be able to coach successfully. But how can you? How do you start from nothing as an outside coach and start to build those bonds with your team? We're going to talk about that. One way to kind of objectify this a little bit, or at least put some terms and some diagrams around a kind of a nebulous, fluffy, fuzzy concept, is through the trust and influence infinity loop. So this is a model for developing trusting relationships and delivering positive outcomes that was based on original work by Mike Kottmeyer of Leading Agile. But we've taken this and tweaked it a little bit for the teams that we coach. And what it looks like is follows. So every interaction with a team starts with access. They have to grant you the ability to come in and meet with their team, with your team, or with them, I should say. From there, you start moving to the right and down, learning empathy, developing a point of view, and eventually the team will feel safe with you. So before you can influence a team, they have to trust you. Influence grows through feeling and understanding the team's pain through developing empathy. You have to come back to, I see your point of view, I hear you, I understand, and more importantly, I'm here with you. It ultimately results in a feeling of kinship, camaraderie, and safety. And at that point, you and the team can work together to solve any kind of technical problem in your way. So the concept of agency, letting the coach act as a member of the team, integrity, asking, are we doing the right thing? Have we decided what we're going to do? Competence, being able to do the thing, and then results, figuring out how we did the thing and how we can do better next time. It comes back to empathy. Embracing hearts and minds. Do it your own way. It takes a lot of practice in terms of interacting with teams. You'll have a lot of different personalities on teams, a lot of different ways teams interact, and that all builds into things. So you have to remember to meet people where they are. That's probably the biggest piece of advice I can give someone who's struggling with this concept of empathy or how to build it with teams. Last thing I want to talk about here is problem ownership, which is something that's very important to technical coaching because technical coaches do not own the solutions that they help teams implement. Now, this is true even if they're learning technology for the first time or they're working with the same technology they have for 20 years. It doesn't matter. Instead, our job is to guide them to make valid, good technical decisions on behalf of the product and the business. Now, unfortunately, that goes against our engineering instinct, and we have to fight it every day. When I started out as a coach, it was very difficult for me not to basically give the answer, right? You have to guide people to the answer as opposed to go right out and say, you want to implement it using this technology or in this pattern. The other thing to keep in mind is because my background as a software engineer might be different than the background of the team here, I might not have as good of a concept in terms of what external factors could impact that particular product that would lead to a different technical decision than the one that I would have chosen. So it's important to give the team as much agency as possible in that way. Our goal is to empower teams. First step is, again, to demonstrate empathy. And this is probably done best through an example. So I have a quote here. Learning how to set up a drone YAML file as a part of a new CI/CD pipeline can be difficult, but I feel your pain because I didn't understand it myself and I can help. So that's kind of putting yourself into the team's shoes and moving forward. It's especially helpful if you have indeed struggled through that problem before. It can be relieving for the team if they understand that. Second step is to hand the problem back. Remember, it isn't the coach's job to create the solution, it's to guide the team towards their own solution. As such, don't do that for them. Find out what they've tried so far and give suggestions to guide them in the proper direction. Often they'll lean on the coach when an error appears or something doesn't go according to plan. You have to make sure that they continue to own their problem. Step 3, ask for permission and give suggestions. Request permission from the team to weigh in and provide suggestions for problem solutions and potential pros and cons of each. What kind of database are you looking for? Do you want to have a SQL database like Postgres or a NoSQL database like Cassandra? What are your use cases? What do you think? What do you think are the pluses and minuses? I can provide you some, but provide me some context as to why you're looking to make that decision. Alternatively, find out if they're more interested in discovering the solution themselves and provide them the resources to go out and do that. Next, let them make their choice. Do the team the honor of assuming they can figure it out, make the best choices for their team. Like I mentioned before, they're going to have more context than the coach will. So in a lot of cases, it's just that the coach allows them the agency to make those decisions for themselves. Teams may defer to coaches by default, so it's important to let them know that their opinions are not only valid, but vital. And finally, wish them luck. This doesn't mean, good luck, see ya. It means more maintaining a positive attitude and following up with teams afterwards. You're in their corner, both during the coaching engagement and beyond. So you want to maintain a good attitude, maintain a good rapport, and find out their findings, find out how they did. And you might learn a thing or two about technology as a coach then that you can apply to more teams. A few other tools of the trade for us as Rise coaches before we wrap up today that I wanted to go over very, very quickly are mob programming and pair programming. In a remote environment, this could be a little bit tricky, but this is something that can help a lot when it comes to teams that are of varying skill levels. So if you have a couple of very experienced engineers on a team and a couple of very limited experienced engineers on a team, you can provide mentorship opportunities for the more experienced engineers and menteeship opportunities for and knowledge gaining opportunities for the less experienced engineers. So that's a huge helpful thing, even if you only do it once in a while. Immersive learning space. So I talked very briefly about our immersive learning space in terms of the Target Dojo. This is a space that is in 3 different places at 3 different Target HQs where teams can come in, they bring their own work, and we as coaches help work with them both from an agile perspective and also from a technology perspective to deliver more value for Target. We have hands-on exercises, workshops, and guided learning. We teach technology as software engineering coaches, and now we teach it remotely. A couple of the last things that I've been working on are things related to workshops related to the technology powering our architecture at Target, distributed systems concepts, a lot of those kinds of things with hands-on activities that we do through lots of the Zoom features like annotations or breakout rooms. So we do that to make sure that folks have the ability to continue to interact with us. And finally, our 50 Days of Learning initiative. So this is something that's Target company-wide that allows all engineers, all people in Target Technology Services to spend about 50 days of their work life basically devoted to learning new things. And we have partnerships with Pluralsight, we have partnerships with O'Reilly and other resources that team members can go out and use to better themselves. And with that, here is my contact information. That's really all I have for today. I will be heading over to the Q&A webinar somewhere here very shortly here. So if folks have questions, comments, I'm definitely interested in hearing stories. I'm definitely interested in helping any way I can to help serve your needs in terms of making coaching better, making engineers better. That's my job. So I love doing it. So again, thanks for attending, and I will see you soon.
Awesome, Miggs. Thank you very much for that look at coaching at Target. Don't forget to join Miggs for the QA. And up next, we've got software architecture, a story about business value and trade-offs. See you in a minute.